Daniel chapter 2 Introduction. The revelation of the unshakable kingdom. Daniel 2 is a breathtaking revelation of God's absolute rule over history, capturing a sacred moment where earthly power trembles and heavenly wisdom shines. The narrative begins with King Nebuchadnezzar shaken by a mysterious dream that exposes the utter bankruptcy of human wisdom and plunges the empire into a desperate death decree. Into this chaos steps a young exile named Daniel, a man with no earthly advantage but direct access to the throne of heaven. Through a miraculous midnight revelation, Daniel's witness proclaims the timeless truth. Human wisdom fails, but God reveals His sovereign purposes to those who seek Him in prayer. The king's paralyzing turmoil and the spectacular failure of human wisdom, verses 1 to 11. The sovereign God disturbing the peace, verse 1. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. At the zenith of Babylon's power, King Nebuchadnezzar stands as an unrivaled CEO of the ancient world, surrounded by unparalleled wealth and military might. Yet, Daniel 2:1 pulls back the curtain to reveal that even the most powerful man on earth is vulnerable. Here he lies, awake in a palace, filled with restlessness and inner tension. Gripped by a divine turmoil that robs him of sleep, the king's distress proves that possession cannot produce peace and earthly power cannot guarantee clarity of mind. We will see how the monarch's sleepless night is a divine setup of God's glory. Earthly power confronted by divine mystery, verses 2-3. In a state of volatile desperation, verse 2 says, So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. Nebuchadnezzar summons Babylon's full spectrum of occult wisdom, issuing an unprecedented and ruthless command. Verse 3, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. The world's most powerful man, Nebuchadnezzar, admits that despite his absolute authority, he is internally shaken by a divine mystery he cannot master. A shift in language, a shift in audience, flattery, delay, and the limits of human wisdom. Verse 4. Verse 4 records the astrologer's response to the king, spoken in Aramaic.
Tell us, sir, you are the king, and we will interpret for you.
Their words drip with royal flattery, yet they expose a fatal weakness. These so-called experts can function only when supplied with information. Their wisdom is reactive, dependent on data rather than revelation. Significantly, the astrologers switched to Aramaic, the international language of diplomacy and commerce in the ancient world. This linguistic shift, which continues through to the end of chapter 7, signals a global declaration of God's sovereignty over every Gentile nation. The ultimatum, clearing the stage for God, verses 5 and 6. In response to the astrologer's request, Nebuchadnezzar issues an impossible mandate and a high-stakes ultimatum.
You must tell me both the dream and its interpretation.
By demanding the dream itself, the king unknowingly clears the stage of all human pretension, buying time before an unchanging decree, verses 7 to 9. By demanding the dream itself, the king ensures that the revelation cannot be faked, manufactured, or manipulated. In a world where dreams were treated as divine messages and kings depended on elite experts to decode them, the hollow wisdom of Babylon's brightest minds begin to unravel. With no revelation, no insight, and no solution, they resort to delay, because delay is all that human wisdom can offer without God. When human wisdom reaches its final limit, weakness is admitted. Verses 10-11. The astrologers answered the king, "There is not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, have ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among men." This honest admission highlights the vast gulf between human ability and divine power. It proves that what God reveals cannot be guessed, manipulated, or manufactured. The astrologers' education and influence have reached a dead end. Their so-called wisdom is exposed as a facade, designed for comfortable times but powerless in the face of a divine crisis. They correctly identified that the answer must be supernatural, but wrongly conclude that God is distant. Their confession creates a vacuum of hope that only Daniel can fill. The desperate power of prayer and the glorious midnight revelation. Verses 12-23. When earthly wisdom meets its limit, the world's final answer to divine mystery. Verse 12. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. When earthly power is confronted by its own limitations, it often resorts to rage and destruction, turning a moment of intellectual failure into a ruthless decree of death. Faith under fire. Verses 13-18. When faced with a death-dealing decree, Daniel does not panic. Instead, he responds with calm, strategic wisdom. He turns to his faithful and prayerful brothers, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and together they plead for mercy from heaven. This is a hallmark of spiritual maturity. True confidence is not found in intellect or position, but in a living connection with God, the source of all truth. The strategy of the secret place and the symphony of praise. Verses 19-23. In the quiet darkness of the night, God reveals the mystery to Daniel in a vision, and his immediate response is a symphony of praise. He does not merely celebrate the answer, he celebrates the all-knowing God who gave it, the one who changes seasons, removes and raises kings, and reveals deep and hidden things. Daniel's worship reminds us that revelation must always lead to reverence. While Babylon sleeps in fear, God speaks in revelation, not to the king, but to a praying servant. The courageous conduit. Verses 24-25. Verse 24. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, "Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him." Daniel steps into a scene of impending slaughter and transforms it into a platform for salvation. While the world's elite experts are in hiding, the man with the divine revelation is ushered into the throne room with supernatural speed. Daniel doesn't just seek to save himself, he uses his access to protect even those who could not find the answer themselves. The great deflection. Verses 26-28. When the impatient king asks in verse 27, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" He is looking for a human hero. But Daniel understood that he is not the source of the answer, but merely the conduit for it. By declaring in verse 27 and 28, Daniel replied,
"No wise man, enchanter, magician, or soothsayer can reveal this mystery, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries."
Daniel deflects the spotlight from himself and points it directly toward the God in heaven, proving the true spiritual authority flows from deep humility. The purpose of revelation. Verses 29-30. Daniel makes it clear in verse 30, "This mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than other living men, but so that you, O king, may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind." Daniel clarifies that he is merely a humble vessel receiving God's revelation so that the king might understand the divine destiny of his heart and the future of the world. The colossal vision and the unstoppable stone. Verses 31-45. The formidable image, a map of human pride. Verses 31-33. Daniel reveals a breathtaking vision of a colossal statue representing successive world empires.
The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay.
The supernatural strike, verses 34-35. Then comes the most breathtaking climax in prophetic history. A mysterious supernatural rock cut out without human hands hurtles down the earth. It does not strike the head, it strikes the statue at its weakest point, the feet. In an instant, the entire imposing structure shatters into a worthless chaff and is blown away by the wind. But the rock grows into a global mountain. This is God's everlasting kingdom, unshakable and eternal. From gold to clay, the inevitable decay of earthly power. Verses 36-43. Verse 36. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king.
First, the head of gold represented the Babylon Empire from roughly 605 to 539 BCE. Nebuchadnezzar himself was this head of gold. Next, the chest and arms of silver, which represented the Medo-Persian Empire from roughly 539 to 331 BCE. Two arms represent the dual kingdom of the Medes and Persians. It was inferior to Babylon in esteem, but greater in size and law. Next, the belly and thighs of bronze, which represented the kingdom of Greece from roughly 331 to 168 BCE. This period ushered in the rise of Alexander the Great and his swift conquests. This empire would dominate with culture and philosophy, influencing even Rome and beyond. Next, the legs of iron represented the Roman Empire from roughly 168 BCE to 476 CE. Known for its military might and longevity, Rome crushed all that came before it. Next, the feet of iron and clay, the final stage of the statue. The iron is still present, a remnant of the old Roman strength, but it's now mixed with clay, brittle, unstable, easily broken. This symbolizes a divided kingdom, a mixture of strong and weak nations, some powerful like iron, others fragile like clay. These nations do not cleave to one another, just as iron and clay cannot truly mix. This prophetic image points to our own time, the age of alliances, democracies, and unions where nations form temporary partnerships but remain fundamentally fractured. Technological strength may be iron, but cultural division, political instability, and moral weakness are the clay.
The Rock of Ages, heaven's final answer to earthly pride, verses 44-45. But look at the rock. This stone grows into a vast global mountain that fills the entire earth. Daniel proclaims this as God's everlasting, unshakable kingdom. Unlike the metals that deteriorate, this kingdom will never be destroyed, never be handed over to any other power, and never fade away. Divine promotion and the triumphant celebration of the sovereign God, verses 46-49. The staggering reversal, verses 46-47. The proud tyrant King Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold, falls prostrate on his face before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. In a moment of overwhelming conviction, the most powerful man on earth declares, verse 47,
"Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, the one who can reveal the greatest of mysteries."
This was a supreme acknowledgement of God's superiority. Promotion and influence, verses 48-49. Because Daniel was faithful to God's truth, God was faithful to Daniel's position.
The king then gave Daniel many gifts and made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief of all the wise men in the palace. In addition, at Daniel's request, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were also given important positions in the Babylonian government.
This is a divine reversal. The very men marked for execution in verse 13 become administrators of the empire in verse 49. God not only delivers his servants, he elevates them for his glory. Conclusion: the victory of the stone and your place in the kingdom. Everything that intimidates you right now, the gilded gold of your competition, the iron of your hardship, and the brittle clay of your own insecurities, is temporary. Remember this: every earthly pressure has an expiration date, but God's purpose for your life is eternal. Daniel's world-changing breakthrough did not begin in the palace of power. It began on his knees in the secret place. So, here is your roadmap for standing strong in a shaking world. When life confuses you, pray. When your problem seems impossible, trust. When God reveals the answer, praise. When success and promotion come, give God all the glory. Do not fear the towering statues of this age. You serve the God who humbles kings and has already secured your victory, not by human hands, but by his unshakable power. So go forth, stand tall, walk boldly. Your victory is secure in the rock of ages, and you belong to the kingdom that will last forever.